everyone. My name is Esmeralda Guerrero, and welcome to Wellness Live. This session is brought to you by the Living Whole Wellness Program here at Loma Linda University Health. Today we are going to be talking about a very important topic, the basics of fire safety. Today we have a very special guest here with us, Preston Brown. He has been with the organization for over 8 years, and he is the Fire and Life Safety Coordinator for Environmental Health and Safety. And he is here to talk to us about a very important topic, like I said, on how to protect ourselves from the very devastating effects of fires. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Preston Brown.
Thank you, Esmeralda. It's a pleasure to be with you today, talking about fire safety. We're going to go over some basics of fire safety and how you can protect your home and your family from fire. First of all, we must address the fact that fires bring quite a bit of concern and fear to us. There have been many times where I have sat and thought about what could possibly be lost for good in my home if there's a fire. And it doesn't take too long of that to get cold sweats and start really having a nervous time. So we want to try to change that level of fear into a level of confidence, and hopefully some of the tips and tools that we provide to you today will help take you to that next level in fire safety preparedness. We've done pretty good in the U.S. of addressing the fire safety issue. Fires are on the decline, but unfortunately the home fires are still a major issue. And I think if we tackle home fire safety, really a lot of the problem with fire that we have in our country will go away. According to the FEMA Department, U.S. Department of Fire Administration, they estimate about 1.2 million fires are occurring in the U.S. each year, and that's according to 2013 data. Now that is causing a loss in dollars of $11.5 billion, which is pretty astounding, and a good chunk of that, as I said, is going to house fires, attributed to house fires. 3,240 are fire-related deaths are the result of these fires each year. And then 3 out of 4 civilians are dying, not in public places, not in large stadiums, not in even nightclubs and places where we would think that you would have more of a risk for fire. It's not in factories, it's in homes. 3 out of 4 people that die in a fire-related death are in homes. So we definitely have a problem, and really the stakes are highest at home. At home is where all of our most precious possessions are kept and our memories of our family. And so it's very important that we address fire safety in our home, and how can we work on preventing it. So it just takes a little bit of time, money, and energy to invest in fire safety. Now, my poor wife, when we first got married, I had a binder about this thick of fire safety information, evacuation plan. I had checklists and all kinds of fire prevention information, emergency contacts. It doesn't take all of that, and since then she's toned me down a little bit. But it really just takes a little bit of time investment, and you can raise your level of safety. So we're going to talk about how you can do that, how you can address fire prevention, how you can address fire detection, and additional fire risks, and then we'll take a quick break for some questions and go into our fire response and fire suppression and what you can do in your home in that regard. So let's talk about fire prevention. What can you do to prevent fires? Well, we live in California, and sometimes the risk for fires is not internal to our home, but it's on the outside. If you live anywhere in the mountains or any rural area, you probably have a risk for wildfires. And so there are some things that you can do about this. If you live in those areas, probably already familiar with some of this information, but you want to keep about 30 feet clear at all around your entire house of all surface fuel, twigs, plants, things like that, fences, anything connected to the house. If you have wood shingles, it's a good idea to change those out as you can with something that's more resistant to fire. As well as if you're planting trees, you want to plant a more deciduous tree, a leafy tree, rather than a coniferous tree, as they burn a lot more rapidly. So there are some things you want to keep your grass mowed and things like that that you can do to prevent fires from affecting your house in a wildfire situation. Now, when we talk about the inside, we have some common ignition sources. According to NFPA, we have some data here. 50% of fires are actually happening in the kitchen. So if there's one thing that you can do in the kitchen, what would that be? You can stay in the kitchen while you're cooking. A lot of the reason that there's fires in kitchens is because people walk away while they're cooking. So very important to make sure that you stay there for that. Some of the expected contributors would be, candles, smoking, appliances that malfunction, fireplaces, but there's also overloaded electrical outlets. And so these are multiple outlet adapters that are plugged into a single outlet, and overloading your outlets, you can actually create a risk for fire there as well. The NFPA put together on their website, nfpa.org, if you go under public education resources, you'll find that they have a good home fire safety checklist that you can go through with your family. If you've got kids, it'd be great for them to kind of send them on a scavenger hunt looking for fire risk in your home. And so I would definitely recommend checking out nfpa.org and that resource. It's fantastic. Let's talk about smoke detection, fire detection. According to NFPA and also Consumer Reports, almost any resource that you go to, there are several different areas they recommend to have smoke alarms in your house. And that would include on each floor, in the kitchen or outside the kitchen area, and then inside and outside bedroom areas as well. And you can also throw in some CO alarms. In fact, if you buy a house after 2011, it's actually required by law that the detectors are there. So at that point, it's just maintaining them and making sure the batteries are changed out. There are different types of detectors, one being interconnected detectors, and those are the preferred method because when one goes off, they all go off. And so it sounds an alarm through the entire house, and they also have battery backup, but they are hardwired. You can also buy battery-only detectors, and those are very, very cheap. You can install them, put a 9-volt battery in it, and do it that way. They are now creating detectors that have a 10-year battery sealed up within the detector, and so that's a great option as well. And so you can take a look at those and purchase one of those for your home. Either way you go, whatever detector type it is, you want to test them each month. Make sure that they're working. You want to replace the batteries every year. Unless you have that 10-year battery life. Then you want to replace the entire detector after 10 years. Just by putting in smoke alarms, smoke detectors in your home, you can double your chance to survive a fire according to NFPA studies. In fact, it's more than doubling your chance. So it's a fantastic thing you can do for not a whole lot of money. Fire risks. Let's talk about some things that could make the fire worse in your home, but you could address ahead of time. The thing about home fires is a lot of them, most all of them are preventable. And so by just taking a few steps, you can actually prevent fires in your home. One of the important things you can do, and I'm sure we've all heard horrific stories of hoarders and all kinds of things stored in the house. The best thing that you can do is be organized, because if you have combustibles and just any kind of impediments in the way in your stairs or in front of outside doors or bedroom doors, it's going to restrict your ability to get out quickly in a fire. So you want to make sure your exits are totally clear. That's probably one of the most important things you can do. And then take a look at the types of materials you're covering your walls with and your floor with. Is it highly combustible or highly flammable materials? Is it styrofoam type stuff? Is it synthetic-based materials? Those are going to burn more rapidly. And so making sure that you don't have a lot of combustibles on the walls, banners, posters, that kind of stuff, very important to try to reduce that. And then furniture as well. You can, both furniture and Christmas decorations, you can type in on YouTube and see all kinds of crazy videos of how quickly those fires develop. And so my recommendation during the holidays, without being a Grinch, is I would recommend getting a fake Christmas tree, because you're reducing the risk of fire in your home. When you think about it, when you have a extremely combustible and sometimes dry Christmas tree, and then you put an electrical ignition source right on top of it, not a great idea. So definitely you want to try to be careful during the holidays. Holidays is not a time you want to have a home fire. And then if you have gas containers, oil containers, oily rags, chemicals, things like that, you want to store them in metal containers, and if you can, store them in a shed that's not adjacent to the house, and you kind of move a big risk away instead of storing it in your garage. The last item I'll talk about in fire risk is any compressed gas cylinders. So if there's somebody with oxygen in the house, if there's aerosols, things like that, you want to take those and try to secure those so they don't become projectiles in a fire situation. So those are just a few things that you can address from a fire risk perspective and lower that risk for your home and for your family. I think now we have time for a couple questions, so we'll move to that.
Yes, we have a couple of questions that came in. By the way, valuable information. I especially like the idea of the scavenger hunt, just making fire safety fun for the kids. I love that. So here are a few questions that came in. What batteries are best in the smoke detectors?
The very best that you can get are the 10-year batteries, because they've been proven to last that long, and then you just throw the entire detector away. If you're trying to go on the cheap, it's better to have something rather than nothing. So the 9-volt battery detectors are also a good way to go.
Great. Another question that we have coming in is, should I have an evacuation plan for all my family members in place, or is this different than earthquakes?
So you can actually approach an evacuation plan from an all hazards perspective. So not focusing just on fire, but if I have to evacuate my house, this is where I'm going to go, whether it's a tree, a mailbox, a neighbor's house. If I'm going to evacuate the neighborhood, this is where I'm going to go. So a little bit, you want to try to approach it at a general perspective like that.
Okay, great. Another question that we have here is, how do I know if I'm overloading the electrical outlet?
Well, number one, if you're blowing fuses, that's a good sign that you're probably overloading the outlet. Generally, you want to use a surge protector, and the surge protector is going to give you that additional protection if you want to plug multiple things into a single outlet. Otherwise, especially appliances, you want to plug them directly into the wall.
Great. And then we have another question here, and I think you kind of went over this, but it doesn't hurt to emphasize it again. What is a major cause of home fires?
Cooking is 50% of home fires, so that's the major cause. Yep.
Okay, well, great. These are some of the questions that came in, and we're looking forward to more questions as they come in. Thank you.
All right. I want to present to you a scenario, because that's how a fire is going to do it. It's going to present itself as a scenario. If it's 4 in the morning and smoke and flames begin approaching your door, coming under your door and filling your room, what would you do? How do you know what your response is going to be? Because we all, I think, play that in our mind. We play that out, and this is what I think I'm going to do. There's only 2 ways to know what you're going to do. And that is, first of all, if it happens, then you'll know. Unfortunately, we don't want to wait till that point. So the other way to know what you're going to do is to have drilled. Actually put it into practice what you are going to do in a fire situation. That's especially valuable if you have children. To go through the whole drill, practice, and it may sound crazy, but even doing it in the middle of the night, waking everybody up as you test the smoke alarm, and having everyone get out. Where are we going to go? Talking about that ahead of time. So drilling is very important if you want to be sure of your response in a fire. Let's talk about our response. How are we going to respond? I'm sure we all remember early on in school, they taught us to stop, drop, and roll. And it's amazing how quickly as adults we forget that. You can see videos online of this as well, people catching on fire, their clothes catching on fire, and they just start running. And that just feeds the fire. So it really is true. You want to stop, drop, and roll. Now, if we have a fire response plan, if you want to use an acronym, you can. It doesn't have to be this detailed. But a good way to remember what to do is RACE. And this is what we use as an acronym to teach employees in the hospital as well. So we want to rescue, alarm, contain, and extinguish. Let's talk about each of those. First of all, for rescuing, when you put together an evacuation plan for your home, this is a great opportunity to include the kids as well and let them help you draw a floor plan of your house. Talk about having 2 ways out of every room, making sure that you have a meeting place established ahead of time where we're going to meet, whether it's a neighborhood, whether it's a neighbor or a mailbox or a tree or some form of clear meeting place. And then going through and actually practicing with them. It's funny, every year we have a Children's Day, and a lot of kids come through our smoke trailer, and we start to fill the room with smoke, and we ask them, what's another way out of this room? And you'd be shocked at how many times we hear, I'm going to break the window. I'm not sure why it got into our country's psyche or our culture that you have to break a window to get out in a fire. Most windows are operable, so the easy thing to do is just to open the window. But you want to practice that, especially if you have a 2-story home and bedrooms upstairs. Then you want to have that practice with your kids. And you can go to Home Depot or Amazon.com or any place like that and find one of those evacuation ladders that you can use during an emergency. So it's important to train and to drill with those activities. Alarm, that's basically just calling 911, letting them know your address, letting them know where you're at, if there's anybody trapped inside, anybody with mobility issues, things like that. And the next one is contain. To do that, we close the door, close windows, so that way oxygen is restricted to the fire. Now, this is probably the single most important thing that you can do and the simplest thing that you could do even starting tonight, and that is sleeping with your bedroom door closed. Just that will give you additional 3 to 5 minutes of time to evacuate. And that's just for a basic hollow core door. And what that means is there's just cardboard on the insides. It's not even a very well made door. But if you have a thicker, full wood door, then you may have an additional 10 minutes. So NBC, in Dallas Fort Worth, and also Underwriters Laboratory UL put together many tests and studies that show that this is a fact. 3 to 5 minutes is what they recommend that you can get out safely just by having the door closed and obviously having working smoke alarms. Now let's talk about extinguish. We want to go through how to use it, that you need to purchase one, how to mount it, and also maintain it. Let's talk about using the extinguisher, and this is another acronym that we use. Everybody probably is familiar with this, but you can even teach this at home. Pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. This is a simple acronym just to use. You want to pull the pin that just lets you know that it's not been tampered with, not been used before. You want to aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the handle, and slowly sweep side to side, covering the entire base of whatever's on fire. That's how to use it. That segues us right into suppression. Extinguisher is one method of suppression for fires. What we would recommend, without getting all technical into the classes of fires, and these aren't even all the classes of fires, but I'm sure most of us remember from chemistry, you have a Class A, Class B, Class C, which is combustibles, flammable liquids, and electrical fires. And for those main 3 classes of fires, where most hazards in your home are going to be, you have a dry chemical ABC extinguisher you can purchase at Home Depot, again online for 30, 40 bucks maybe. It's not that much to have an extinguisher, and it gives you a whole nother level of protection. And there's other types: CO2 extinguishers, water extinguishers, kitchen cooking oils and fat extinguishers, and you can get those as well, but the most important type is to have an ABC. Where would you put that? You don't want to put it in hard to get places like this. On top of a cabinet, underneath the sink, probably not the best places to put it. If you can, you want to mount it on the wall. In our home, we have it right between our kitchen and our dining room, and that's a great place to put it. So it's not too close to the stove where you could actually access it, but it is close by. The garage is another good place to put it. Your car, even in your bedroom area. It's totally up to you where you want to put them, but each one of those places adds an additional level of safety. It's not a whole lot to maintain fire extinguishers either. For about $12 to $15, you can get it serviced annually. And so that's one of the important things, just making sure that the powder inside hasn't caked at the bottom and it's going to work in an emergency. You can take a look at it monthly is what we're required to in the hospital. We're required to do monthly inspections. You don't have to do that at home, obviously. You don't have an authority having jurisdiction or regulatory agency looking over your shoulder. But it is a good idea to check it every once in a while, make sure that the pressure gauge is still in the green, make sure that it doesn't have any dents or rust building up on the cylinder itself, and making sure that the pin and seal is still in place. That's a very simple way to maintain your fire extinguisher. Again, there are other types of suppression. So one being the fire blanket, and this would be a good place, a good thing to put in your kitchen and just hanging on the wall, and you can actually just pull it down, and in a stovetop fire, you just throw that over whatever's on fire, over the pot, and it will actually suffocate the fire. So that's a good alternative. You also have fire sprinklers in some of the newer houses that are being built, and you can even retrofit older houses, and it's probably not as expensive as you might think. The National Fire Protection Agency or Association, NFPA, has a group within their company called the Fire Protection Research Foundation. And they did a study nationwide and found that the average for installation cost for fire sprinkler systems is $1.35 per square foot. Now, what that means is you have an additional protection level that is automatic. It's going to suppress a fire even if you're not at home. And sprinklers don't all go off at once, like you may have seen in the movies. They go off one at a time, each one that gets set off. So the water damage actually isn't that great. They actually reduce property damage by 69%. And they reduce the loss of life in homes that have fire sprinklers. They have an 83% chance of survival. So it definitely is absolutely worth the cost and the investment. And then if you just address those basics, if you just talk about how to prevent fires in your area, if you just take a look at your surroundings and make sure that you've done what you can to minimize the risk, you're not overloading surge protectors, you're watching your kitchen fires, things very simple like testing your smoke alarms, making sure you change out the batteries in those. Those are simple things that you can do. And then maybe a long-term goal would be putting fire sprinklers in your home. But these are mostly, for the most part, these are basic things you can do to protect your family, and because of that, you'll sleep a lot better at night. So thank you for your attention. I think we have a few more questions.
Yes, we have a few more questions that came in. One of the questions from one of our viewers is, what tools besides the evacuation ladders and the extinguishers should I be considering?
Evacuation ladders, is that one of the ones they mentioned? Okay.
Yes.
That's an important one, and extinguishers, smoke detectors, those are the primary things, the primary tools in your home that you're going to use for fire. We could go a little off topic and get into making sure that you have a gas shut-off so that you prevent fires in an earthquake, a water shut-off tool, knowing where those are at your home, how to shut those off at the street. That would be an important one as well.
Okay, great. Another question, and I think this has to do with the extinguishers as well. My wife would kill me if I put it on the wall in our home. Any other advice?
If you have a coat closet, it's not the ideal place because it's a little bit hidden, but some place that's a little hidden, at least if you have one, that's the important thing. But if there's a place that you can hide it, definitely try to do that. It's worth it.
Okay, great. Now, another question that we have here is, anything that would be good to do to prepare my home for a vacation when away from my home?
Definitely, you're going to want to talk to your neighbors, make sure that they're watching out for you. Sometimes people will assume when they see smoke that somebody else has already called. Somebody's probably in the house and they know about it. So letting neighbors know is an important thing to do. But also, if you can, installing sprinklers is great protection, because then it doesn't matter if you're there or not, you will have that protection level.
Okay, what about a good resource website where people can go and get this kind of information that you've provided us with?
NFPA.org has an incredible amount of resources that has checklists, prevention lists. Also, the U.S. Fire Administration has a lot of the data that I talked about today, and they have tools on there as well that you can use.
What about the scavenger hunt that I fell in love with? Any thoughts or ideas on how to even organize that for the kids?
Prizes would be great, but whatever you can do to make it interesting, make it fun, would be great. But I think just even looking for those types of things, they're going to get a sense of fulfillment and accomplishment, saying that I'm a part of this family and I'm doing what I can to make this home safe.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Preston, for this valuable information. We are happy that you were able to come with us this evening. Now, thank you to our viewers for joining us today and for typing in your questions. We had a very active audience today. So thank you so much for joining us. And I want to invite you for our next month's Wellness Live. That is September 28th at 5:30. And the title of that is Ergonomics in Action. And with that, you'll be able to hear our expert here on campus on ergonomics. Her name is Lynn Thornstrom, and she will be available next month, September 28th, here at Wellness Live. Thank you for joining us. This has been Wellness Live.